Welcome to Soft Hour Library. Tonight's story begins now. Close your eyes and rest.
Chapter 5. The Man in the Road. "Father," said Bundle, opening the door of Lord Caterham's special sanctum and putting her head in, "I'm going up to town in the Hispano. I can't stand the monotony down here any longer." "We only got home yesterday," complained Lord Caterham. "I know. It seems like 100 years. I'd forgotten how dull the country could be." "I don't agree with you," said Lord Caterham. "It's peaceful, that's what it is, peaceful, and extremely comfortable. I appreciate getting back to Treadwell more than I can tell you. That man studies my comfort in the most marvelous manner. Somebody came round only this morning to know if they could hold a tally for girl guides here." "A rally," interrupted Bundle. "Rally or tally, it's all the same. Some silly word meaning nothing whatever. But it would have put me in a very awkward position having to refuse. In fact, I probably shouldn't have refused, but Treadwell got me out of it. I've forgotten what he said, something damned ingenious which couldn't hurt anybody's feelings and which knocked the idea on the head absolutely." "Being comfortable isn't enough for me," said Bundle. "I want excitement." Lord Caterham shuddered. "Didn't we have enough excitement 4 years ago?" he demanded plaintively. "I'm about ready for some more," said Bundle. "Not that I expect I shall find any in town, but at any rate I shan't dislocate my jaw with yawning." "In my experience," said Lord Caterham, "people who go about looking for trouble usually find it." He yawned. "All the same," he added, "I wouldn't mind running up to town myself." "Well, come on," said Bundle, "but be quick because I'm in a hurry." Lord Caterham, who had begun to rise from his chair, paused. "Did you say you were in a hurry?" he asked suspiciously. "In the devil of a hurry," said Bundle. "That settles it," said Lord Caterham. "I'm not coming. To be driven by you in the Hispano when you're in a hurry, no, it's not. Fair on any elderly man. I shall stay here." "Please yourself," said Bundle and withdrew. Treadwell took her place. "The vicar, my lord, is most anxious to see you. Some unfortunate controversy having arisen about the status of the boys' brigade." Lord Caterham groaned. "I rather fancied, my lord, that I had heard you mention at breakfast that you were strolling down to the village this morning to converse with the vicar on the subject." "Did you tell him so?" asked Lord Caterham eagerly. "I did, my lord. He departed, if I may say so, hot-foot. I hope I did right, my lord." "Of course you did, Treadwell. You are always right. You couldn't go wrong if you tried." Treadwell smiled benignly and withdrew. Bundle, meanwhile, was sounding the klaxon impatiently before the lodge gates, while a small child came hastening out with all speed from the lodge, admonishment from her mother following her. "Make haste, Katy. That be her ladyship in a mortal hurry as always." It was indeed characteristic of Bundle to be in a hurry, especially when driving a car. She had skill and nerve and was a good driver. Had it been otherwise, her reckless pace would have ended in disaster more than once. It was a crisp October day, with a blue sky and a dazzling sun. The sharp tang of the air brought the blood to Bundle's cheeks and filled her with the zest of living. She had that morning sent Gerald Wade's unfinished letter to Loring Wade at Dean Priory, enclosing a few explanatory lines. The curious impression it had made upon her was somewhat dimmed in the daylight, yet it still struck her as needing explanation. She intended to get hold of Bill Eversley sometime, and extract from him fuller details of the house party which had ended so tragically. In the meantime, it was a lovely morning, and she felt particularly well, and the Hispano was running like a dream. Bundle pressed her foot down on the accelerator, and the Hispano responded at once, mile after mile. Vanished, traffic stops were few and far between, and Bundle had a clear stretch of road in front of her. And then, without any warning whatever, a man reeled out of the hedge and onto the road right in front of the car. To stop in time was out of the question. With all her might, Bundle wrenched at the steering wheel and swerved out to the right. The car was nearly in the ditch, but not quite. It was a dangerous maneuver, but it succeeded. Bundle was almost certain that she had missed the man. She looked back and felt a sickening sensation in the middle of her anatomy. The car had not passed over the man, but nevertheless it must have struck him in passing. He was lying face downwards on the road, and he lay ominously still. Bundle jumped out and ran back. She had never yet run over anything more important than a stray hen. The fact that the accident was hardly her fault did not weigh with her at the minute. The man had seemed drunk, but drunk or not, she had killed him. She was quite sure she had killed him. Her heart beat sickeningly in great pounding thumps, sounding right up in her ears. She knelt down by the prone figure and turned him very gingerly over. He neither groaned nor moaned. He was young, she saw, rather a pleasant-faced young man, well-dressed and wearing a small toothbrush mustache. There was no external mark of injury that she could see, but she was quite positive that he was either dead or dying. His eyelids flickered and the eyes half opened. Piteous eyes, brown and suffering like a dog's. He seemed to be struggling to speak. Bundle bent right over. "Yes," she said, "yes." There was something he wanted to say, she could see that. Wanted to say badly, and she couldn't help him, couldn't do anything. At last the words came, a mere sighing breath. "7 dials, tell." "Yes," said Bundle again. It was a name he was trying to get out, trying with all his failing strength. "Yes, who am I to tell?" "Tell Jimmy the Siger." He got it out at last, and then suddenly his head fell back and his body went limp. Bundle sat back on her heels, shivering from head to foot. She could never have imagined that anything so awful could have happened to her. He was dead and she had killed him. She tried to pull herself together. What must she do now? A doctor, that was her first thought. It was possible, just possible, that the man might only be unconscious, not dead. Her instinct cried out against the possibility, but she forced herself to act upon it. Somehow or other she must get him into the car and take him to the nearest doctor's. It was a deserted stretch of country road, and there was no one to help her. Bundle, for all her slimness, was strong. She had muscles of whipcord. She brought the Hispano as close as possible, and then, exerting all her strength, she dragged and pulled the inanimate figure into it. It was a horrid business, and one that made her set her teeth, but at last she managed it. Then she jumped into the driver's seat and started off. A couple of miles brought her into a small town, and on inquiry she was quickly directed to the doctor's house. Dr. Cassell, a kindly, middle-aged man, was startled to come into his surgery and find a girl there who was evidently on the verge of collapse. Bundle spoke abruptly. "I think I've killed a man. I ran over him. I brought him along in the car. He's outside now. I was driving too fast, I suppose. I've always driven too fast." The doctor cast a practiced glance over her. He stepped over to a shelf and poured something into a glass. He brought it over to her. "Drink this down," he said, "and you'll feel better. You've had a shock." Bundle drank obediently, and a tinge of color came into her pallid face. The doctor nodded approvingly. "That's right. Now I want you to sit quietly here. I'll go out and attend to things." After I've made sure there's nothing to be done for the poor fellow, I'll come back and we'll talk about it. He was away some time. Bundle watched the clock on the mantelpiece. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, a quarter of an hour, 20 minutes would he never come. Then the door opened and Dr. Cassell reappeared. He looked different. Bundle noticed that at once grimmer and at the same time more alert. There was something else in his manner that she did not quite understand, a suggestion of repressed excitement. "Now then, young lady," he said, "let's have this out. You ran over this man, you say. Tell me just how the accident happened." Bundle explained to the best of her ability. The doctor followed her narrative with keen attention. "Just so, the car didn't pass over his body." "No, in fact, I thought I'd missed him altogether." "He was railing, you say?" "Yes, I thought he was drunk." "And he came from the hedge?" "There was a gate just there, I think. He must have come through the gate." The doctor nodded. Then he leaned back in his chair and removed his pince-nez. "I've no doubt at all," he said, "that you're a very reckless driver, and that you'll probably run over some poor fellow and do for him one of these days, but you haven't done it this time. But the car never touched him. This man was shot." Chapter 6. 7 Dials again. Bundle stared at him, and very slowly the world, which for the last 3/4 of an hour had been upside down, shifted till it stood once more the right way up. It was quite 2 minutes before Bundle spoke, but when she did it was no longer the panic-stricken girl but the real Bundle, cool, efficient, and logical. "How could he be shot?" she said. "I don't know how he could," said the doctor dryly. "But he was. He's got a rifle bullet in him all right. He bled internally, that's why you didn't notice anything." Bundle nodded. "The question is," the doctor continued, "who shot him? You saw nobody about." Bundle shook her head. "It's odd," said the doctor. "If it was an accident, you'd expect the fellow who did it would come running to the rescue unless, just possibly, he didn't know what he'd done." "There was no one about," said Bundle. "On the road, that is." "It seems to me," said the doctor, "that the poor lad must have been running. The bullet got him just as he passed through the gate, and he came reeling onto the road in consequence. You didn't hear a shot." Bundle shook her head. "But I probably shouldn't anyway," she said, "with the noise of the car." "Just so. He didn't say anything before he died." "He muttered a few words." "Nothing to throw light on the tragedy." "No, he wanted something I don't know what told to a friend of his." "Oh, yes, and he mentioned 7 Dials." Said Dr. Cassell. "Not a likely neighborhood for one of his class. Perhaps his assailant came from there. Well, we needn't worry about that now. You can leave it in my hands. I'll notify the police. You must, of course, leave your name and address, as the police are sure to want to question you. In fact, perhaps you'd better come round to the police station with me now. They might say I ought to have detained you." They went together in Bundle's car. The police inspector was a slow-speaking man. He was somewhat overawed by Bundle's name and address when she gave it to him, and he took down her statement with great care. "Lads," he said, "that's what it is. Lads practicing. Cruel stupid, them young varmints are. Always loosing off at birds with no consideration for anyone as may be the other side of a hedge." The doctor thought it a most unlikely solution, but he realized that the case would soon be in abler hands, and it did not seem worthwhile to make objections. "Name of deceased?" asked the sergeant, moistening his pencil. "He had a card case on him. He appears to have been a Mr. Ronald Devereux, with an address in the Albany." Bundle frowned. The name Ronald Devereux awoke some chord. Of remembrance, she was sure she had heard it before. It was not until she was halfway back to Chimneys in the car that it came to her. Of course, Ronnie Devereaux, Bill's friend in the Foreign Office. He and Bill and yes, Gerald Wade. As this last realization came to her, Bundle nearly went into the hedge. First Gerald Wade, then Ronnie Devereaux. Jerry Wade's death might have been natural, the result of carelessness, but Ronnie Devereaux's surely bore a more sinister interpretation. And then Bundle remembered something else. 7 dials. When the dying man had said it, it had seemed vaguely familiar. Now she knew why. Gerald Wade had mentioned 7 dials in that last letter of his written to his sister on the night before his death. And that again connected up with something else that escaped her. Thinking all these things over, Bundle had slowed down to such a sober pace that nobody would have recognized her. She drove the car round to the garage and went in search of her father. Lord Caterham was happily reading a catalog of a forthcoming sale of rare editions, and was immeasurably astonished to see Bundle. "Even you," he said, "can't have been to London and back in this time." "I haven't been to London," said Bundle. "I ran over a man." "What?" "Only I didn't really. He was shot." "How could he have been?" "I don't know how he could have been, but he was." "But why did you shoot him?" "I didn't shoot him." "You shouldn't shoot people," said Lord Caterham in a tone of mild remonstrance. "You shouldn't really. I dare say some of them richly deserve it, but all the same it will lead to trouble." "I tell you I didn't shoot him." "Well, who did?" "Nobody knows," said Bundle. "Nonsense," said Lord Caterham. "A man can't be shot and run over without anyone having done it." "He wasn't run over," said Bundle. "I thought you said he was." "I said I thought I had." "A tire burst, I suppose," said Lord Caterham. "That does sound like a shot. It says so in detective stories." "You really are perfectly impossible, Father. You don't seem to have the brains of a rabbit." "Not at all," said Lord Caterham. "You come in with a wildly impossible tale about men being run over and shot, and I don't know what, and then you expect me to know all about it by magic." Bundle sighed wearily. "Just attend," she said. "I'll tell you all about it in words of 1 syllable. "There," she said when she had concluded. "Now have you got it?" "Of course. I understand perfectly now. I can make allowances for your being a little upset, my dear. I was not far wrong when I remarked to you before starting out that people looking for trouble usually found it. I am thankful," finished Lord Caterham with a slight shiver, "that I stayed quietly here." He picked up the catalogue again. "Father, where is 7 dials?" "In the East End somewhere, I fancy. I have frequently observed buses going there, or do I mean 7 Sisters? I have never been there myself, I am thankful to say. Just as well, because I don't fancy it is the sort of spot I should like. And yet, curiously enough, I seem to have heard of it in some connection just lately." "You don't know a Jimmy the Siger, do you?" Lord Caterham was now engrossed in his catalogue once more. He had made an effort to be intelligent on the subject of 7 dials. This time he made hardly any effort at all. "The Siger," he murmured vaguely. "The Siger, one of the Yorkshire the Sigers." "That's what I'm asking you. Do attend, Father. This is important." Lord Caterham made a desperate effort to look intelligent, without really having to give his mind to the matter. "There are some Yorkshire the Sigers," he said earnestly, "and unless I am mistaken, some Devonshire the Sigers also. Your great-aunt Selina married a the Siger." "What good is that to me?" cried Bundle. Lord Caterham chuckled. It was very little good to her, if I remember rightly. You're impossible, said Bundle, rising. I shall have to get hold of Bill. Do, dear, said her father absently as he turned a page. Certainly, by all means, quite so. Bundle rose to her feet with an impatient sigh. I wish I could remember what that letter said, she murmured more to herself than aloud. I didn't read it very carefully. Something about a joke that the Seven Dials business wasn't a joke. Lord Caterham emerged suddenly from his catalogue. Seven Dials, he said. Of course I've got it now. Got what? I know why it sounded so familiar. George Lomax has been over. Treadwell failed for once and let him in. He was on his way up to town. It seems he's having some political party at the Abbey next week, and he got a warning letter. What do you mean by a warning letter? Well, I don't really know. He didn't go into details. I gather it said beware and trouble is at hand, and all those sort of things. But anyway, it was written from Seven Dials. I distinctly remember his saying so. He was going up to town to consult Scotland Yard about it. You know George. Bundle nodded. She was well acquainted with that public-spirited cabinet minister, George Lomax, His Majesty's permanent Under-Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs, who was shunned by many because of his inveterate habit of quoting from his public speeches in private. In allusion to his bulging eyeballs, he was known to many Bill Eversley, among others, as Cotters. Tell me, she said, was Cotters interested at all in Gerald Wade's death? Not that I ever heard of. He may have been, of course. Bundle said nothing for some minutes. She was busily engaged in trying to remember the exact wording of the letter she had sent on to Loring Wade, and at the same time she was trying to picture the girl to whom it had been written. What sort of a girl was this to whom, apparently, Gerald Wade was so devoted? The more she thought over it, the more it seemed to her that it was an unusual letter for a brother to write. Did you say the Wade girl was Jerry's half-sister? She asked suddenly. Well, of course, strictly speaking, I suppose she wasn't. I mean his sister at all. But her name's Wade. Not really. She wasn't old Wade's child. As I was saying, he ran away with his second wife, who was married to a perfect blackguard. I suppose the courts gave the rascally husband the custody of the child, but he certainly didn't avail himself of the privilege. Old Wade got very fond of the child and insisted that she should be called by his name. I see, said Bundle. That explains it. Explains what? Something that puzzled me about that letter. She's rather a pretty girl, I believe, said Lord Caterham, or so I've heard. Bundle went upstairs thoughtfully. She had several objects in view. First, she must find this Jimmy the Sidger. Bill, perhaps, would be helpful there. Ronnie Devereux had been a friend of Bill's. If Jimmy the Sidger was a friend of Ronnie's, the chances were that Bill would know him too. Then there was the girl, Loring Wade. It was possible that she could throw some light on the problem of Seven Dials. Evidently, Jerry Wade had said something to her about it. His anxiety that she should forget the fact had a sinister suggestion. Chapter 7. Bundle pays a call. Getting hold of Bill presented few difficulties. Bundle motored up to town on the following morning, this time without adventures by the way, and rang him up. Bill responded with alacrity and made various suggestions as to lunch, tea, dinner, and dancing, all of which suggestions Bundle turned down as made. In a day or two, I'll come and frivol with you, Bill, but for the moment I'm up on business. Oh, said Bill, what a beastly bore. It's not that kind, said Bundle. It's anything but boring. Bill, do you know anyone called Jimmy the Sidger? Of course, so do you. No, I don't, said Bundle. Yes, you do. You. Must. Everyone knows old Jimmy. Sorry, said Bundle. Just for once I don't seem to be everyone. Oh, but you must know Jimmy Pink-faced chap. Looks a bit of an ass, but really he's got as many brains as I have. You don't say so, said Bundle. He must feel a bit top-heavy when he walks about. Was that meant for sarcasm? It was a feeble effort at it. What does Jimmy the Siger do? How do you mean, what does he do? Does being at the Foreign Office prevent you from understanding your native language? Oh, I see you mean, has he got a job? No, he just tools around. Why should he do anything? In fact, more money than brains. Oh, I wouldn't say that. I told you just now that he had more brains than you'd think. Bundle was silent. She was feeling more and more doubtful. This gilded youth did not sound a very promising ally, and yet it was his name that had come first to the dying man's lips. Bill's voice chimed in suddenly with singular appropriateness. Ronnie always thought a lot of his brains. You know Ronnie DeVere, the Siger was his greatest pal. Ronnie. Bundle stopped, undecided. Clearly Bill knew nothing of the other's death. It occurred to Bundle for the first time that it was odd the morning papers had contained nothing of the tragedy. Surely it was the kind of spicy item of news that would never be passed over. There could be one explanation, and one explanation only. The police, for reasons of their own, were keeping the matter quiet. Bill's voice was continuing. I haven't seen Ronnie for an age not since that weekend down at your place. You know, when poor old Jerry Wade passed out. He paused and then went on. Rather a foul business that altogether. I expect you've heard about it. I say, Bundle, are you there still? Of course I'm here. Well, you haven't said anything for an age. I began to think that you had gone away. No, I was just thinking over something. Should she tell Bill of Ronnie's death? She decided against it. It was not the sort of thing to be said over the telephone. But soon, very soon, she must have a meeting with Bill. In the meantime, Bill, hello. I might dine with you tomorrow night. Good, and we'll dance afterwards. I've got a lot to talk to you about. As a matter of fact, I've been rather hard hit the foulest luck. Well, tell me about it tomorrow, said Bundle, cutting him short rather unkindly. In the meantime, what is Jimmy the Siger's address? Jimmy the Siger. That's what I said. He's got rooms in German Street, I mean German Street or the other one. Bring that Class A brain to bear upon it. Yes, German Street. Wait a bit and I'll give you the number. There was a pause. Are you there still? I'm always there. Well, one never knows with these dash telephones. The number is 103. Got it. 103. Thank you, Bill. Yes, but I say, what do you want it for? You said you didn't know him. I don't, but I shall in half an hour. You're going round to his rooms. Quite right, Sherlock. Yes, but I say, well, for one thing he won't be up. Won't be up? I shouldn't think so. I mean, who would if they hadn't got to? Look at it that way. You've no idea what an effort it is for me to get here at 11 every morning, and the fuss Cotters makes if I'm behind time is simply appalling. You haven't the least idea, Bundle, what a dog's life this is. You shall tell me all about it tomorrow night, said Bundle hastily. She slammed down the receiver and took stock of the situation. First she glanced at the clock. It was 5:20 to 12. Despite Bill's knowledge of his friend's habits, she inclined to the belief that Mr. the Siger would by now be in a fit state to receive visitors. She took a taxi to 103 German Street. The door was opened by a perfect example of the retired gentleman's gentleman. His face, expressionless and polite, was such a face as may be found by the score in that particular district of London. "Will you come this way, madam?" He ushered her upstairs into an extremely comfortable sitting room containing leather-covered armchairs of immense dimensions. Sunk in one of those monstrosities was another girl, rather younger than Bundle, a small, fair girl, dressed in black. "What name shall I say, madam?" "I won't give any name," said Bundle. "I just want to see Mr. the Siger on important business." The grave gentleman bowed and withdrew, shutting the door noiselessly behind him. There was a pause. "It's a nice morning," said the fair girl timidly. "It's an awfully nice morning," agreed Bundle. There was another pause. "I motored up from the country this morning," said Bundle, plunging once more into speech, "and I thought it was going to be one of those foul fogs, but it wasn't." "No," said the other girl, "it wasn't," and she added, "I've come up from the country too." Bundle eyed her more attentively. She had been slightly annoyed at finding the other there. Bundle belonged to the energetic order of people who like to get on with it, and she foresaw that the second visitor would have to be disposed of and got rid of before she could broach her own business. It was not a topic she could introduce before a stranger. Now, as she looked more closely, an extraordinary idea rose in her brain. Could it be? Yes, the girl was in deep mourning. Her black, silk-clad ankles showed that. It was a long shot, but Bundle was convinced that her idea was right. She drew a long breath. "Look here," she said. "Are you by any chance Loring Wade?" Loring's eyes opened wide. "Yes, I am. How clever of you to know. We've never met, have we?" Bundle shook her head. "I wrote to you yesterday, though. I'm Bundle Brent." "It was so very kind of you to send me Jerry's letter," said Loring. "I've written to thank you. I never expected to see you here." "I'll tell you why I'm here," said Bundle. "Did you know Ronnie DeVere?" Loring nodded. "He came over the day that Jerry, you know, and he's been to see me 2 or 3 times since. He was one of Jerry's greatest friends." "I know. Well, he's dead." Loring's lips parted in surprise. "Dead, but he always seemed so fit." Bundle narrated the events of the preceding day as briefly as possible. A look of fear and horror came into Loring's face. "Then it is true, it is true." "What's true?" "What I've thought, what I've been thinking all these weeks. Gerald didn't die a natural death. He was killed." "You've thought that, have you?" "Yes, Jerry would never have taken things to make him sleep." She gave the little ghost of a laugh. "He slept much too well to need them. I always thought it queer, and he thought so too. I know he did." "Who?" "Ronnie, and now this happens. Now he's killed too." She paused and then went on. "That's what I came for today. That letter of Jerry's you sent me. As soon as I read it, I tried to get hold of Ronnie, but they said he was away. So I thought I'd come and see Jimmy. He was Ronnie's other great friend. I thought perhaps he'd tell me what I ought to do." "You mean," Bundle paused, "about 7 DIALS?" Loring nodded. "You see," she began. But at that moment, Jimmy the Siger entered the room. Chapter 8. Visitors for Jimmy. We must at this point go back to some 20 minutes earlier, to a moment when Jimmy the Siger, emerging from the mists of sleep, was conscious of a familiar voice speaking unfamiliar words. His sleep-ridden brain tried for a moment to cope with the situation, but failed. He yawned and rolled over again. "A young lady, sir, has called to see you." The voice was implacable. So prepared was it to go on repeating the statement indefinitely that Jimmy resigned himself to the inevitable. He opened his eyes and blinked. "A. Stevens," he said, "say that again." "A young lady, sir, has called to see you." Oh, Jimmy strove to grasp the situation. "Why?" "I couldn't say, sir." "No, I suppose not. No," he thought it over. "I suppose you couldn't." Stevens swooped down upon a tray by the bedside. "I will bring you some fresh tea, sir. This is cold." "You think that I ought to get up and see the lady?" Stevens made no reply, but he held his back very stiff, and Jimmy read the signs correctly. "Oh, very well," he said. "I suppose I'd better she didn't give her name." "No, sir." "H. She couldn't be by any possible chance my Aunt Jemima, could she? Because if so, I'm damned if I'm going to get up." "The lady, sir, could not possibly be anyone's aunt, I should say, unless the youngest of a large family." "Aha," said Jimmy. "Young and lovely, is she? What kind is she?" "The young lady, sir, is most undoubtedly strictly comme il faut, if I may use the expression." "You may use it," said Jimmy graciously. "Your French pronunciation, Stevens, if I may say so, is very good, much better than mine." "I am gratified to hear it, sir. I have lately been taking a correspondence course in French." "Have you really? You're a wonderful chap, Stevens." Stevens smiled in a superior fashion and left the room. Jimmy lay trying to recall the names of any young and lovely girls strictly comme il faut who might be likely to come and call upon him. Stevens re-entered with fresh tea, and as Jimmy sipped it, he felt a pleasurable curiosity. "You've given her the paper and all that, I hope, Stevens," he said. "I supplied her with the Morning Post in Punch, sir." A ring at the bell took him away. In a few minutes he returned. "Another young lady, sir." "What?" Jimmy clutched his head. "Another young lady. She declines to give her name, sir, but says her business is important." Jimmy stared at him. "This is damned odd, Stevens, damned odd. Look here, what time did I come home last night?" "Just upon 5 o'clock, sir." "And was I how was I?" "Just a little cheerful, sir, nothing more. Inclined to sing Rule Britannia." "What an extraordinary thing," said Jimmy. "Rule Britannia, eh? I cannot imagine myself in a sober state ever singing Rule Britannia. Some latent patriotism must have emerged under the stimulus of just a couple too many. I was celebrating at the Mustard and Cress, I remember. Not nearly such an innocent spot as it sounds, Stevens." He paused. "I was wondering." "Yes, sir." "I was wondering whether under the aforementioned stimulus I had put an advertisement in a newspaper asking for a nursery governess or something of that sort." Stevens coughed. "Two girls turning up. It looks odd. I shall eschew the Mustard and Cress in future. That's a good word. Stevens eschew. I met it in a crossword the other day and took a fancy to it." Whilst he was talking, Jimmy was rapidly appareling himself. At the end of 10 minutes he was ready to face his unknown guests. As he opened the door of his sitting room, the first person he saw was a dark, slim girl who was totally unknown to him. She was standing by the mantelpiece, leaning against it. Then his glance went on to the big leather-covered armchair, and his heart missed a beat. Loring. It was she who rose and spoke first a little nervously. "You must be very surprised to see me, but I had to come. I'll explain in a minute. This is Lady Eileen Brent. Bundle, that's what I'm usually known as. You've probably heard of me from Bill Eversley." "Oh, rather, of course I have," said Jimmy, endeavoring to cope with the situation. I say, do sit down and let's have a cocktail or something. But both girls declined. As a matter of fact, continued Jimmy, I'm only just out of bed. That's what Bill said, remarked Bundle. I told him I was coming round to see you, and he said you wouldn't be up. Well, I'm up now, said Jimmy encouragingly. It's about, Jerry, said Lauren, and now about Ronnie. What do you mean by, and now about Ronnie? He was shot yesterday. What? Cried Jimmy. Bundle told her story for the second time. Jimmy listened like a man in a dream. Old Ronnie shot, he murmured. What is this damned business? He sat down on the edge of a chair, thinking for a minute or two, and then spoke in a quiet, level voice. There's something I think I ought to tell you. Yes, said Bundle encouragingly. It was on the day Jerry Wade died. On the way over to break the news to you, he nodded at Loring. In the car, Ronnie said something to me. That is to say, he started to tell me something. There was something he wanted to tell me, and he began about it, and then he said he was bound by a promise and couldn't go on. Bound by a promise, said Loring thoughtfully. That's what he said. Naturally, I didn't press him after that, but he was darned odd all through. I got the impression then that he suspected, well, foul play. I thought he'd tell the doctor so, but no, not even a hint. So I thought I'd been mistaken. And afterwards, with the evidence and all, well, it seemed such a very clear case. I thought my suspicions had been all bosh. But you think Ronnie still suspected? Asked Bundle. Jimmy nodded. That's what I think now. Why, none of us have seen anything of him since. I believe he was playing a lone hand trying to find out the truth about Jerry's death, and what's more, I believe he did find out. That's why the devils shot him. And then he tried to send word to me but could only get out those 2 words. 7 dials, said Bundle and shivered a little. 7 dials, said Jimmy gravely. At any rate, we've got that to go on with. Bundle turned to Loring. You were just going to tell me. Oh, yes, first about the letter. She spoke to Jimmy. Jerry left a letter, Lady Eileen. Bundle found it. She explained the circumstances in a few words. Jimmy listened, keenly interested. This was the first he had heard of the letter. Loring took it from her bag and handed it to him. He read it, then looked across at her. This is where you can help us. What was it Jerry wanted you to forget? Loring's brows wrinkled a little in perplexity. It's so hard to remember exactly now. I opened a letter of Jerry's by mistake. It was written on cheap sort of paper, I remember, and very illiterate handwriting. It had some address in 7 dials at the head of it. I realized it wasn't for me, so I put it back in the envelope without reading it. Sure? Asked Jimmy very gently. Loring laughed for the first time. I know what you think, and I admit that women are curious. But you see, this didn't even look interesting. It was a kind of list of names and dates. Names and dates, said Jimmy thoughtfully. Jerry didn't seem to mind much, continued Loring. He laughed. He asked me if I had ever heard of the Mafia, and then said it would be queer if a society like the Mafia started in England, but that kind of secret society didn't take on much with English people. Our criminals, he said, haven't got a picturesque imagination. Jimmy pursed up his lips into a whistle. I'm beginning to see, he said. 7 dials must be the headquarters of some secret society. As he says in his letter to you, he thought it rather a joke to start with. But evidently it wasn't a joke, he says, as much. And there's something else, his anxiety that you should forget what he told you. There can be only one reason for that. If that society suspected that you had any knowledge of its activity, you too would be in danger. Gerald realized the peril, and he was terribly anxious for you. He stopped, then he went on quietly. I rather fancy that we're all going to be in danger if we go on with this. If, cried Bundle indignantly. I'm talking to you too. It's different for me. I was poor old Ronnie's pal. He looked at Bundle. You've done your bit. You've delivered the message he sent me. No, for God's sake, keep out of it, you and Loring. Bundle looked questioningly at the other girl. Her own mind was definitely made up, but she gave no indication of it just then. She had no wish to push Loring Wade into a dangerous undertaking, but Loring's small face was alight at once with indignation. You say that. Do you think for 1 minute I'd be contented to keep out of it when they killed Jerry, my own dear Jerry, the best and dearest and kindest brother any girl ever had? The only person belonging to me I had in the whole world. Jimmy cleared his throat uncomfortably. Loring, he thought, was wonderful, simply wonderful. Look here, he said awkwardly, you mustn't say that, about being alone in the world all that rot. You've got lots of friends only too glad to do what they can. See what I mean? It is possible that Loring did, for she suddenly blushed, and to cover her confusion began to talk nervously. That's settled, she said. I'm going to help. Nobody's going to stop me. And so am I, of course, said Bundle. They both looked at Jimmy. Yes, he said slowly. Yes, quite so. They looked at him inquiringly. I was just wondering, said Jimmy, how we were going to begin. Chapter 9. Plans. Jimmy's words lifted the discussion at once into a more practical sphere. All things considered, he said, we haven't got much to go on. In fact, just the word 7 Dials. As a matter of fact, I don't even know exactly where 7 Dials is. But anyway, we can't very well comb out the whole of that district, house by house. We could, said Bundle. Well, perhaps we could eventually, though I'm not so sure. I imagine it's a well-populated area, but it wouldn't be very subtle. The word reminded him of the girl's socks, and he smiled. Then, of course, there's the part of the country where Ronnie was shot. We could nose around there, but the police are probably doing everything we could do and doing it much better. What I like about you, said Bundle sarcastically, is your cheerful and optimistic disposition. Never mind her, Jimmy, said Loring softly. Go on. Don't be so impatient, said Jimmy to Bundle. All the best sleuths approach a case this way, by eliminating unnecessary and unprofitable investigation. I'm coming now to the third alternative, Gerald's death. Now that we know it was murder, by the way, you do both believe that, don't you? Yes, said Loring. Yes, said Bundle. Good, so do I. Well, it seems to me that there we do stand some faint chance. After all, if Jerry didn't take the chloral himself, someone must have got into his room and put it there, dissolved it in the glass of water, so that when he woke up he drank it off. And of course left the empty box or bottle or whatever it was. You agree with that? Yee, said Bundle slowly, but wait, and that someone must have been in the house at the time. It couldn't very well have been someone from outside. No, agreed Bundle, more readily this time. Very well. Now that narrows down things considerably. To begin with, I suppose a good many of the servants are family ones there, your lot, I mean. Yes, said Bundle. Practically all the staff stayed when we let it. All the principal ones are there still, of course. There have been changes among the under-servants. Exactly, that's what I am getting at. You, he addressed Bundle, must go into all that. Find out when new servants were engaged. What about footmen, for instance? One of the footmen is new. John, his name is. Well, make inquiries about John, and about any others who have only come recently. I suppose, said Bundle slowly, it must have been a servant. It couldn't have been one of the guests. I don't see how that's possible. Who were there exactly? Well, there were 3 girls, Nancy and Helen and Socks. Socks Daventry, I know her. May have been. Girl who was always saying things were subtle. That's Socks all right. Subtle is one of her words. And then there were Jerry Wade and me and Bill Eversley and Ronnie. And of course, Sir Oswald and Lady Coote. Oh, and Pongo. Who's Pongo? Chap called Bateman secretary to old Coote. Solemn sort of cove, but very conscientious. I was at school with him. There doesn't seem anything very suspicious there, remarked Loring. No, there doesn't, said Bundle. As you say, we'll have to look amongst the servants. By the way, you don't suppose that clock being thrown out of the window had anything to do with it? A clock thrown out of the window, said Jimmy, staring. It was the first he had heard of it. I can't see how it can have anything to do with it, said Bundle. But it's odd somehow. There seems no sense in it. I remember, said Jimmy slowly. I went in to see poor old Jerry, and there were the clocks ranged along the mantelpiece. I remember noticing there were only 7, not 8. He gave a sudden shiver and explained himself apologetically. Sorry, but somehow those clocks have always given me the shivers. I dream of them sometimes. I'd hate to go into that room in the dark and see them there in a row. You wouldn't be able to see them if it was dark, said Bundle practically. Not unless they had luminous dials. Oh, she gave a sudden gasp and the color rushed into her cheeks. Don't you see? 7 dials. The others looked at her doubtfully, but she insisted with increasing vehemence. It must be. It can't be a coincidence. There was a pause. You may be right, said Jimmy the Sidger at last. It's dashed odd. Bundle started questioning him eagerly. Who bought the clocks? All of us. Who thought of them? All of us. Nonsense. Somebody must have thought of them first. It didn't happen that way. We were discussing what we could do to get Jerry up, and Pongo said an alarum clock, and somebody said one would be no good, and somebody else, Bill Eversley, I think said why not get a dozen, and we all said good egg and hoofed off to get them. We got 1 each and an extra one for Pongo and 1 for Lady Coote just out of the generosity of our hearts. There was nothing premeditated about it, it just happened. Bundle was silenced but not convinced. Jimmy proceeded to sum up methodically. I think we can say we're sure of certain facts. There's a secret society with points of resemblance to the mafia in existence. Jerry Wade came to know about it. At first he treated it as rather a joke, as an absurdity, shall we say. He couldn't believe in its being really dangerous. But later something happened to convince him, and then he got the wind up in earnest. I rather fancy he must have said something to Ronnie Devereux about it. Anyway, when he was put out of the way, Ronnie suspected, and he must have known enough to get on the same track himself. The unfortunate thing is that we've got to start quite from the outer darkness. We haven't got the knowledge the other 2 had. Perhaps that's an advantage, said Loring coolly. They won't suspect us, and therefore they won't be trying to put us out of the way. I wish I felt sure about that, said Jimmy in a worried voice. You know, Loring, old Jerry himself wanted you to keep out of it. Don't you think you could? No, I couldn't, said Loring. Don't let's start discussing that again. It's only a waste of time. At the mention of the word time, Jimmy's eyes rose to the clock, and he uttered an exclamation of astonishment. He rose and opened the door. Stevens. Yes, sir. What about a spot of lunch, Stevens? Could it be managed? I anticipated that it would be required, sir. Mrs. Stevens has made preparations accordingly. That's a wonderful man, said Jimmy as he returned, heaving a sigh of relief. Brain, you know, sheer brain. He takes correspondence courses. I sometimes wonder if they do any good to me. Don't be silly, said Loring. Stevens opened the door and proceeded to bring in a most recherché meal. An omelet was followed by quails and the very lightest things in soufflés. Why are men so happy when they're single? Said Loring tragically. Why are they so much better looked after by other people than by us? Oh, but that's rot, you know, said Jimmy. I mean they're not. How could they be? I often think. He stammered and stopped. Loring blushed again. Suddenly Bundle let out a whoop, and both the others started violently. Idiot, said Bundle. Imbecile me, I mean. I knew there was something I'd forgotten. What? You know Cotter's George Lomax, I mean. I've heard of him a good deal, said Jimmy. From Bill and Ronnie, you know. Well, Cotter's is giving some sort of a dry party. Next weekend he's had a warning letter from 7 Dials. What? Cried Jimmy excitedly, leaning forward. You can't mean it. Yes, I do. He told Father about it. Now what do you think that points to? Jimmy leant back in his chair. He thought rapidly and carefully. At last he spoke. His speech was brief and to the point. Something's going to happen at that party, he said. That's what I think, said Bundle. It all fits in, said Jimmy almost dreamily. He turned to Loring. How old were you when the war was on? He asked unexpectedly. 9, no, 8. And Jerry, I suppose, was about 20. Most lads of 20 fought in the war. Jerry didn't. No, said Loring after thinking a minute or two. No, Jerry wasn't a soldier. I don't know why. I can tell you why, said Jimmy. Or at least I can make a very shrewd guess. He was out of England from 1915 to 1918. I've taken the trouble to find that out, and nobody seems to know exactly where he was. I think he was in Germany. The color rose in Loring's cheeks. She looked at Jimmy with admiration. How clever of you. He spoke German well, didn't he? Oh, yes, like a native. I'm sure I'm right. Listen, you two. Jerry Wade was at the Foreign Office. He appeared to be the same sort of amiable idiot, excuse the term, but you know what I mean, as Bill Eversley and Ronnie Devereux, a purely ornamental excrescence, but in reality he was something quite different. I think Jerry Wade was the real thing. Our Secret Service is supposed to be the best in the world. I think Jerry Wade was pretty high up in that service, and that explains everything. I remember saying idly that last evening at Chimneys that Jerry couldn't be quite such an ass as he made himself out to be. And if you're right, said Bundle, practical as ever, then the thing's bigger than we thought. This 7 Dials business isn't merely criminal, it's international. One thing's certain, somebody has got to be at this house party of Lomax's. Bundle made a slight grimace. I know George well, but he doesn't like me. He'd never think of asking me to a serious gathering. All the same, I might. She remained a moment lost in thought. Do you think I could work it through Bill? Asked Jimmy. He's bound to be there as Cotters's right-hand man. He might bring me along somehow or other. I don't see why not, said Bundle. You'll have to prime Bill and make him say the right things. He's incapable of thinking of them for himself. What do you suggest? Asked Jimmy humbly. Oh, it's quite easy. Bill describes you as a rich young man interested in politics, anxious to stand for Parliament. George will fall at once. You know what these political parties are, always looking for new, rich young men. The richer Bill says you are, the easier it will be to manage. Short of being described as Rothschild, I don't mind, said Jimmy. Then I think that's practically settled. I'm dining with Bill tomorrow night, and I'll get a list of who is to be there. That will be useful. I'm sorry you can't be there, said Jimmy, but on the whole I think it's all for the best. I'm not so sure I shan't be there, said Bundle. Cotters hates me like poison, but there are other ways. She became meditative. And what about me? Asked Loring in a small, meek voice. You're not on in this act, said Jimmy instantly. See, after all, we've got to have someone outside tour. To what? Said Loring. Jimmy decided not to pursue this tack. He appealed to Bundle. Look here, he said. Loring must keep out of this, mustn't she? I certainly think she'd better. Next time, said Jimmy kindly. And suppose there isn't a next time, said Loring. Oh, there probably will be, not a doubt of it. I see, I'm just to go home and wait. That's it, said Jimmy with every appearance of relief. I thought you'd understand. You see, explained Bundle, 3 of us forcing our way in might look rather suspicious, and you would be particularly difficult. You do see that, don't you? Oh yes, said Loring. Then it's settled you do nothing, said Jimmy. I do nothing, said Loring meekly. Bundle looked at her in sudden suspicion. The tameness with which Loring was taking it seemed hardly natural. Loring looked at her. Her eyes were blue and guileless. They met Bundle's without a quiver even of the lashes. Bundle was only partly satisfied. She found the meekness of Loring Wade highly suspicious.